What's up, guys? Over in Tibet, still to this day, Buddhist monks make pilgrimages over the body of the Demoness. The Demoness, they say, lies over the whole of Tibet, and a lot of the temples are built at energy spots to suppress the energy of this demon. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this documentary where just one guy followed along with this Buddhist nun, Annie, as she searches all over Tibet for the secret yogas. They even come across a witness that had seen another nun that knew these secret yogas dissolve into a light body as she passed just a couple weeks prior to them being there. So it's pretty cool. The true Buddhists are on a different level than us. It's not even so much that they're striving for their own enlightenment, which they are, but it's also to better help everyone and to alleviate suffering in the world. So I've always had a lot of respect for Buddhism in that regard. And, with reincarnation, I think it's probably a thing. That's something I'll probably do a whole video on soon, so I won't get into it too deep here. But just imagine if everybody in the world knew for a fact that they were going to get reincarnated. Would that change the way the world operates? And also, what if some of these higher ups have certain rituals to be able to reincarnate, have a new body, and not get the brain scrub? They're able to go from one incarnation to the next and remember everything. Now that would be some pretty advanced, air quotes, technology, if you ask me. Anyway, let's talk about this Demoness over Tibet. Now, first off, I find it interesting that, it's in a human form basically, but they went with Demoness. I even have my own idea of why that is, but we'll get to that. But let's start with myths and beliefs from the time of Songtsen Gampo, which they clock in at 7th century AD. So it describes a pre-Buddhist demoness hostile to Buddhism. She's lying on her back covering all of Tibet. Songtsen Gampo is said to have started building 108 temples throughout the country, from Lhasa to the frontiers of his empire, to pin down vital body parts: shoulders, hips, elbows, knees, hand, and feet, in order to tame the demons. Jokang was the central temple placed above her heart. The Srin Mo legend tells how Nepalese princess Brakuti was having difficulties building a temple for the Buddha statue she had brought from Nepal. Knowing of the newly arrived Chinese princess's expertise in geomancy, the Nepalese princess somewhat reluctantly asked Princess Kongjo for advice. Princess Kongjo consulted her geomantic charts and gave the following reading. So if you look up geomancy today, it's a divination technique, basically rolling the bones. They've got all of these symbols, and I'm not going to get into it at all because what they're talking about with the ancient geomancy and what it is today are not the same thing. It's more, their geomancy is more what we would call feng shui. It's placing objects to where everything around you is in harmony and in balance. You also have to add in that to the ancient Buddhists, the whole world was alive. Everything was a living spirit. Each mountain has a spirit. Each river has a spirit. And geomancy is what they would refer to as magic. And they have the same definition as what you find in ancient Muslim culture for what magic actually is. They say, here's a good definition here. Magic is the art of causing change through the agency of spiritual creatures rather than via directly observable physical means, such as spiritual creatures being persuaded to assist by the use of sacred words or names, talismans, symbols, incense, sacrifices, and material magica. So everybody's heard of magic, but our idea of it today is Disney fairy tale. But what it has been ever since the beginning was the use of some other entity or power that has a mind of its own. That's why they have to get in magic circles to either protect themselves or to lock the demon in there. And unless you've got a lot of magical power, you're not just going to summon a demon by yourself. And I've even heard some of these rituals described as just being self-depraving to prove that you're willing to lower yourself to a certain level before these beings will give you the time of day. And the more I look into this subject, I think that there's a whole class of people that have been using this in touch with other beings, generational wealth. Money's not a thing to them. But in order to get the assistance of these entities, then you have to do something that's mutually beneficial to get them to even care. Or you got to have some good old school spells or something. So now back to the geomantic results of Princess Kongzhou. I perceive that this land of snows, the kingdom of Tibet, is in the form of an ogress lying upon her back. I perceive that the lake at Otang, the plain of milk, is the ogress's heart blood, and that the three mountains are the bones of her heart. Who knew you had bones in your heart? As this lake is directly above the ogress's heart, it will be necessary to fill it with soil and build a shrine upon it. The story goes on that this message was confused by the handmaiden, and so the Nepalese princess disregarded the instructions and began construction of a temple at Ladong. What the Nepalese princess built during the day, however, was demolished by demons at night. Now, I just want to point out that Tibet is a really bad seismic zone. They have really bad earthquakes, so they kept trying to build a temple and it kept getting knocked over. A little bit of magic later, and she was led back to the same lake that the Chinese princess had told her to build the temple on, and she, quote, beheld in the water a 9-terrace stupa composed of various rays of light. Everything in the lake was connected by a web of light radiating out from it. Now, I always think that there's something to these old legends. So, did she literally see a physical light light up a lake, or was it a spiritual light? Was it spiritual entities causing this, or aliens? Or was it the king under the world, or whatever his name was, that Nicholas Rourke was talking about? There's all kinds of legends of Shambhala being an entrance to the inner earth kingdom being in Tibet. So whatever actually did occur, that was the impetus for this, who knows? But they did decide to build their most holy of temples out in the middle of a lake. An earth dagger was positioned on each of the 4 sides of the lake. A great prayer flag was erected. Prayers were offered, and 16 long, thick trunks were cut from juniper trees. The lower end of each was placed on great rocks on all 4 sides, while the upper ends rested on the self-created stone stupa in the center of the lake. Okay, here it says that the stupa was self-created. Here's a drawing depicting all of this, and you see all the rays of light coming out from the stupa, and evidently the logs are sitting on top of that, and all of the people at the bottom appear to be working logs, not stones. And so if you picture that in 3D with the logs up like a teepee, then this is what you get all over Tibet. You see these set up on Mount Everest, and all of these circus tent looking type structures, and all of the flags on there that must be representing all of the different color rays of light coming off, like in this photo. When you look this up, they just say that the prayer flags are used to promote peace and compassion, but I think there's another layer to it here, because it's very much symbolic of that photo of the original stupa, which is a little bit like the pyramids. These are kind of funky little structures, and they're found all over Asia. And the oldest stupa they attribute to India. So how did this trend catch on everywhere? Also, notice how they depict the rainbow ray of light, which is a totally different meaning than what the rainbow is these days. It ain't just Skittles anymore, kids. But I learned something I've never heard about when someone reaches enlightenment in this little study period. Evidently, some people dissolve into a rainbow light when they reach enlightenment at the end of their lives, which I think is a little, well, it definitely is different than what the Buddha himself did, because Buddha reached enlightenment and went on to talk to others about it, as to where it's when somebody is at the end of their life and it's time to go and they reach enlightenment right at the last minute, evidently. If you want to watch a good documentary, just type in Tibet, the Path to Wisdom, and you'll find this. This was really good. It's just one guy that is following Annie, a Buddhist nun, who says she is making a pilgrimage to tame the Demoness and to find these secret yogas. And what's really great about it is just one guy and a drone, and he follows her. I mean, they're walking across Tibet, riding on the backs of trucks. And they go to several monasteries. They go to these meditation caves. She even meets the crazy old hermit that lives out by a lake in the middle of nowhere, who basically tells her, it's a waste of time just wandering around like this. There's nothing you're going to find outside of you that's not inside of you. But she is looking for people with the knowledge of a specific yoga, the yoga of magic heat. She goes to another monastery and she's meeting with the head lama there. And it's a pretty interesting exchange. He asks where she's come from. And she says, I left my covenant to visit holy places and search for the special teachings. And he tells her, stop running after fairy tales. There's no secret teachings. Go back home, shave your head, put on your nun robes. And he's got a very relaxed, jovial demeanor about all this. He's kind of laughing and looking sideways at the camera like, what is this crazy woman up to with this guy with a camera? And, he just shakes his head and says, you're not ready for secret yogas. Stop wandering around. Then she tells him that her convent used to be famous for the transmission of the secret yogas, and now, due to the double CP interference, she doesn't have the freedoms like they have over in this area where they're at now. He tells her, if you like our province, then, you can stay here, but you got to stop wandering around, girl. Then he's laughing and says, you talk of freedom. What freedom? If you're looking for freedom in this world, you better learn to speak Chinese. And then more seriously says, if you want freedom from this world, then you better go sit in a cave. Then she says that, well, back home, the local authorities won't let us sit for more than 30 minutes in a meditation cave. And keep in mind, these guys do meditations for weeks sometimes. Then after this whole exchange of him saying, no, you need to quit wandering around, he says, well, okay, if you're really determined about learning the secret yogas, then go to Gabe Chek. It's the only convent in Tibet that still upholds these teachings. It's built on a special spot where the Earth's energies rise to the surface, and legends say it corresponds to the head of the Demoness. So it was kind of cool because he was definitely playing coy at first and sized her up, and then finally he says, well, okay, you can go over here, and they still know the teachings. And then, just like something out of the movies, he gives a warning saying, the place is especially suited for this practice of the yoga of magic heat, but there's a price to be paid. Those of pure of heart can achieve supreme awakening in this very lifetime, which can take thousands, but the non-virtuous fall into madness. Now, about this cave being a special place with special energies, everybody's felt a bad vibe before. I don't know how many people have noticed when there's a real good energy in a place, but there are different energies to places. If you've ever been in a creepy house or something, you feel that bad energy. Well, it's the same on the flip side, and there's holy places out there. And I do think that there's energies in us and in this world that we're completely lacking in our modern scientific understanding of the world. It's just been stomped out of us. So she goes to this all women nun convent, and this nun is 96 years old, never seen a doctor, had perfect health her whole life, and says it's because she practices the yoga of magic heat. And that's what Annie's been searching for this whole time. So it's a physical exercise, and they have this all written out, illustrated, and she learns this yoga of magic heat. You guys have probably seen Wim Hof, I think his name is, and how he can be submerged in ice cold water. Well, what these ladies do up here is soak their towels in water and then dry it with their own body heat. Now, they're up at probably above 20,000 feet elevation. And if you've ever been wet and cold in the mountains, you know it takes a lot to get your core temperature back. They do get up and go for a walk, but they're kind of just walking slowly, so it's not like they're doing any heavy exercise during this. And it's cold up there. Any of us would have hypothermia within 20 minutes of this. So it is pretty impressive. And then she gets to talking with this other nun, I believe, and she tells her that just 2 weeks prior to them arriving, her older sister died sitting in a meditation posture. She asked her if she was in pain, and she started laughing, saying no. And then lights appeared all around her as her body began to dissolve. And by the time it was done, she was able to pick her up like a doll. And they say that when that happens, they've reached enlightenment, and they're not going to be in samsara anymore. No more reincarnation cycles. Now, this is the first time I ever heard of this rainbow body and got to looking into it, and evidently there's basically 3 different types of this. And they say the highest level of this was what the nun had just described, where the body gradually gets smaller and then it finally turns into a rainbow of light. The next level down is the body turns into light, and there's a sound associated with it, which I've got examples of these we'll get into. And then the next level is the body shrinks down and becomes hard as steel and pings when you tap it. Now, in 1975, after an earthquake, they were trying to fix the road, and 2 border patrolmen were digging out some rubble, and they found a little 1 foot tall, perfectly preserved mummy. In 1952, one of the top military and political officers of the CCP witnessed one of these. And you can just imagine someone in that position passing this story on, but he says that he got word that an old monk was leaving town the following day, and he went down to see him. He got there, and the old monk was just sitting in the room meditating, and all the other monks were around like they were seeing him off, but it wasn't like his bags were packed or anything. Then he witnessed the old monk rise up from his seat. So the whole idea of a meditating monk levitating probably comes from this. The monk would rise up and lower down, and then on the 3rd time, there was a loud sound like a big bolt of lightning had just struck, and the old monk vanished and left a red cloud behind. And the local villagers reported seeing rainbow color lights up in the sky outside the building. I was able to find 4 first-hand accounts, including the one in this video, of this happening since 1952. So I do believe that they're telling the truth on this. I don't think they're lying in the least, and I think that we're kind of smug and arrogant of our self-assessment of our current understanding of the way the world works. I don't think we know anything. I think the great achievements of our current society is that microorganisms can make you sick. Electricity can give you light at night and keep you warm, and the internal combustion engine can get you where you want to go efficiently. Above and beyond that is superfluous. I mean, communications and the internet, I think the world was better off without all of it. Because, we saw exactly what happened with control of it right off of the bat. It all went to few people that insist their narrative is what's really going on out there. And, you know, it was the same thing with TV. And, well, radio first. You know, FDR's best friend was the radio. But where we've stacked up these trophies for our knowledge of the physical world, we've completely lost out on the spiritual side of things. We build buildings where you're going to get the most money for a house, or where the most people are going to stop in and shop, as to where they built buildings because you need to suppress the negative energies, or in a place where positive energies help you to achieve greater understanding. There, I waxed philosophical. But, you know, we don't even need that anymore because we're so advanced in our understanding these days that right off the bat, everybody already had it figured out that that was a physical giant that, if you compare it to the United States, stretches from the East Coast to Colorado. And yeah, no, for real, it's an actual giant. That's what made the Himalayas. I've got the DNA. The first question, you know, I hear this all the time in different videos, but my question is, what did it eat or drink? Because, I mean, I don't think Lake Michigan would be more than a shot glass for something that big. But hey, it's a lot easier than actually having to take a deep dive into anything. You can just look at photos and you're smarter than everybody else. That's our new enlightenment. Now, I can actually support the idea that a single mountain or hill was the body of an ancient giant. There's even a Native American legend that says this. But the subject's just gone to the point where now thousands of miles long, and yeah, everything was a living creature. I don't know if you guys remember this after the 2019 purge and all the real YouTubers got kicked off, but there was a period there where the dumber, most outrageous claim that you put out would just get hundreds of thousands of views all of a sudden. And this encouraged a lot of people to just go off the rails with things. And I think it's unfortunate because there's probably some truth to the subject, but now if you've got a town built on top of a mountain and it looks vaguely like a body, then, well, yeah, that's a petrified giant. All those houses are a petrified giant. The west coast of America, yep, 5,000 mile long squiggly monster with a stinger on its tail. And look, you can even still see the eyeball there. It's funny how all of the farmers, when they were planting their fields, they knew to stay off the pupil of the eyeball. And it totally doesn't look that way because, well, it's all valley around with a big mound or mountain right in the center. But I'm guessing that the people that actually think that this is a 1,300 mile long Demoness across Tibet that makes up the Himalayas probably did not make it 20 minutes into this video. And that's another big problem with our society today, is people have it figured out before they've even looked at the evidence. And those people will never have a deeper understanding than what can be shoved into a 15-second TikTok, where I feel like I've barely scratched the surface on understanding any of this, because there are energies and forces at play in this world that I think the ancients had a much better understanding of, because this is information that was probably given to us by much more enlightened beings than just your average human that lives for 80 years, especially when the humans back then lived upwards of 1,000 years. And that's still just a mortal man or woman, as opposed to a truly immortal, enlightened being. Immortality is a terrifying concept to me. If you were to ask me if I wanted to fall off of a cliff tomorrow or become immortal tomorrow, I would probably take the cliff. And anybody who's actually sat down and truly thought about what it would mean to be immortal in your present condition should be terrified. But anyway, that's a very deep subject that I'm not going into right now. But I do want to talk about the idea of reincarnation in a video pretty soon. So I'll catch you guys in. Static out.